Okay, so we use a lovely smiley picture of Liv for this example, just so we're not staring at some crazy picture. We'll go with, let me get rid of that XMP file. We'll go with this picture of Liv here. And we're just going to drag it into Photoshop and it will open it in Camera Raw. There you see. Now, you've got all these buttons on the right hand side. You've got all this other stuff you can do. If you've never seen Raw before, you might be thinking, oh my God, I don't know what to do. But don't panic, because we're going to learn how to just use things we need to learn. And we can figure out all the other stuff later on once we become competent at doing the basics. But like any kind of edit, well, fundamentally, you've got to remember that you're a photographer and you're editing for photography reasons. You're not a graphic designer. You're not some Photoshop wizard. You're not some kind of high-end retouching guru. You just want to understand how to make your photograph the best it can be and maintain it looking at like a photograph, not like some over-processed piece of junk. So, just like in a camera, when you're looking at exposure, you're looking at white balance, you're looking at focus, all that stuff, we don't want to do anything that destroys all the hard work we've put into the camera. Fundamentally, what you're looking for is a good edit which shows good exposure, how you saw it through the camera, not just wanging sliders around to try and make it look like you think it looks cool on the screen, because remember, your screen is unlikely to be calibrated. We're going to use here the histogram, because the histogram is a thing that kind of guides us all the time. You'll get used to that as I go through tutorials with you. You'll understand why the histogram is important. But really, we're just going to do the basics to match what we did in camera. So we're not going to add, take away much. We're not going to introduce anything we don't want. We're going to make sure what we've got here is what we set out to achieve in the camera. Understanding that our camera can probably only give us about 90% of what we actually want. So you can see on this shot, I did a white balance of daylight on the Canon R6, which is set to the daylight settings on the Bowens lights I'm using, but you can see there's a little bit of colour imbalance. You can see on my uncalibrated screen a little bit of colour imbalance, but if you look on the histogram up here, you see everything on the right hand side here is imbalancing colour, and that's always going to be there, and it will always guide you to tell you when your picture's imbalanced. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look and see if we can fix that. Now, what a lot of people might say is you can come in here and choose one of these. Sometimes it matches quite nicely, but you can see if you get it wrong. Look, if you go to auto, it's added a load of blue. You can see that. You can see it on the screen. If you go to daylight, which I shot it as, it's pretty much the same as shot. If you go to cloudy, it always adds warmth. You can see the red that's appeared up here. We don't want that. Shade will be even worse. And then you've got tungsten, which usually makes it go blue. There you go. And also fluorescent, which is kind of purpley blue. So none of them are going to work. So we go back to our shot. It's not that bad, but there is a little bit of blue and red and a little bit of yellow coming in there, which we don't want. Trust me, when you get to the print stage, if that's still there, you're in big trouble. So a simple way to do it is usually find something that's white or almost white on your screen, in your picture, sorry, with the colour picker here, and to get something like what the white balance should be like. And sometimes it can be a bit hit and miss. You've got to get the right type of white. So you can see there, I've zoomed in and gone through the whitest bit of the eye I could find, and we've got rid of some. We've got a little bit going on, but not very much. Not very much at all. And if we zoom back out like that, and we go on to the preview, you can just see a little subtle shift in the picture. And if you look at the white balance here, when I click between the two views, that's the original, with a bit of blue and a bit of magenta. We'll click on that, and it's pretty much all gone. So I'm actually happy with that. There's not that much there. There's a trace, but when we convert to JPEG, you might find some comes back, because often the way the algorithm works and it strips out the detail, we sometimes get a bit of missed colour come back in. So we'll check that when we get to the next stage of the edit with the JPEG or the TIFF. So the first thing we've done is we've fixed the white balance or the colour balance. That's as close as we're going to get it at this stage without really fine-tuning, spending ages just to try and fix that minuscule little bit of miscolour there. But you can see there's quite a difference between the opening shot and that quick edit. So colour balance them first. Next thing is we just want to check our exposure, and you could do that by, doing all these kind of things. You can see that we're underexposed, or we're overexposed, we're underexposed, we're overexposed. And that should be obvious from your camera tech. But what we want to do is just make sure at this stage we're not blowing any highlights. Now you can see on the histogram here, it's telling me shadows are clipping. Well, I'm not worried about that because that will just be the jumper, the blacks in the jumper. And we can still see detail in the jumper. We zoom in, look, so I'm not too worried about that there. What we're looking for is we don't have any highlight clipping. So let's just say we'd expose it like that. We've now got highlight clipping, as you can see. And what I mean by highlight clipping is wherever you've got a highlight or a shadow, you should still be able to see detail. And we clearly can't see Liv's skin detail there. We bring it back, we can now see detail. So if you look at how I shot it, like that, you can tell when we zoom in, we've still got detail. We've not got no blown highlights, so we've not got any real nasty shadows. So my exposure is pretty good. Okay, so I've checked white balance, I've checked exposure. Now let's just say, for example, I'd shot it like that. Sometimes it might come out like that, and I think, oh, those highlights are a bit hot. If you come and you look at a picture and your highlights are hot like that, you can just adjust the highlights a little bit. You could just take them down like that, and you can see the detail come back in Liv's face now. So I'm gonna reduce the highlights by let's go back to 0, by 10%, just to make sure I don't have any clipping in the highlights. Okay, and likewise for the shadows. If you decide that you've hid the shadows, you want more shadow or less shadow, if you move the shadow slider around, you can see how that makes a massive difference. But again, if you've exposed well, you won't have to do that. But if you've got dark subjects like this, let's say I wanted a bit of more detail in here. If we raise the shadows up, you can see that detail come back. So just for this example, I'm going to put 10% plus on the shadow. So I've reduced the shadows a little bit, and I've reduced the highlights a little bit. I've not touched anything else because my exposure was good to start with. I was pretty close. I've just knocked 10% off highlights and shadows just to give a little bit of play in those areas. I've not had to change the exposure. I've changed the white balance to custom by selecting the eye to get a good watch through white. That is now ready to go and be converted to a JPEG or a TIFF to do further editing. For this example, I'm going to make a JPEG, and I'm just going to click open, and that will now open it into Photoshop Real. And you can see, following on from my last tutorial, that the workspace is set up for me. The histogram history, layers and channels are out of the way, so I can see the picture nice and clearly in the view. So now we'll go on and we'll look up basic editing techniques following on from converting our raw file. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please like, share and subscribe. And if you hit the bell, you'll be notified of every time I bring another tutorial or podcast. Cheers.